All right, right. Well, hello and welcome to today's Build Up webinar episode. We're going to be talking about how high growth contractors increase bid volume without burning out estimators. So, a hot topic. I know with all my conversations I've been having with our customer base, this is always a discussion point typically in our day-to-day conversations. So, I'm Shawn Prince. I'm the VP of Enterprise Experience here at Attentive AI, and I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. So, if you're in estimating or in pre-construction right now, and if you're an attendee here, more than likely you are part of that. Chances are bid volume is going up. ITBs or invitations to bids are coming in faster, and timelines are getting much tighter. And also, teams are being asked to do more with the same or fewer people. I'm seeing that all across the country in each trade and all the construction businesses we talk to. More is being asked to happen with the same amount of team members. So, what we're seeing across the industry is that more bids don't necessarily lead to more growth. And in many cases, they mean more stress, rushed takeoffs or quantity surveys, and teams operating in constant reaction mode versus a more proactive mode. So today's session is really about unpacking the why that happens, and more importantly, how high growth contractors are managing bid volume to really protect their teams, but also improve bid quality and really ensure sustainable, more long term growth. So we've got a fantastic panel today from Infinity Concrete and also the Beam team. Before I ask them to introduce themselves, just a few housekeeping items. So this session is going to be recorded, and we'll send this out as a replay afterwards. But also keep in mind, you can access this on our YouTube channel. And then also, while we work through the discussion today, we'd love for you to interact with us a little bit. And we have a couple ways that you can do that. You've got a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen there. You can drop in any questions that you have. So if we're having a specific conversation about a specific topic today and you've got a question or want to dive a little bit deeper, please feel free to drop that into the Q&A box. We're going to save some time at the end to get to as many questions as we can. We usually can't get to all of them, but we'll save a few minutes to make sure we get to a few of the really important ones. Also, we have a few polls in the discussion today, two, I believe, in particular, and would love for you as they pop up, interact with those. That'll make our discussion interaction a little bit more richer today and really help us understand the issues you might be facing in your day to day. So, like I mentioned, let's get to our panel. We have a fantastic panel from the Infinity Concrete team out of Texas, and would love for each of them to introduce themselves before we jump into our discussion. So, Shawn, sir, we'll start with you. If you guys want to come off mute and join us here, that would be great, and would love for you to introduce yourself.
You bet, Shawn. Thanks for having us. Thanks for putting us together. My name is Shawn McGarity. I'm CEO and founder of Infinity Concrete. Been in the construction business for over 25 years. Done anything from general contracting, residential construction, and my main focus over those years has been a large concrete contractor, so subcontractor, doing high rise, all commercial work, residential foundations, flat work, that type of stuff. But have a lot of expertise otherwise. So.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shawn. Appreciate that. Deron, sir, we'll move over to you.
Hey, thank you very much, Shawn, for having us here for this. My name is Deron Wood. I'm Director of Operations, dealing with new technology intake, equipment rental repairs, monitoring, time cards, and employee resource management. I've been with Infinity Commercial for about a year and a half at this point.
Great. Thank you, Deron. Really appreciate that. Jennifer, we'll move over to you.
Hi, Shawn. Thank you. I am Jennifer Wood. I'm the IT director here at Infinity. I have about 25 years of IT experience, hardware, software, you name it. I've done it across a myriad of industries. Been at Infinity for about 2 years now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that. And last but not least, Arnav, sir, if you would introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Arnav, and I'm one of the product managers here at BMA, and I'm currently working on the platform team.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So let's, question number one to get us going. Let's start with a quick reality check. So, across many contractors right now, like I mentioned earlier, bid volume seems to be up, but the results aren't always what teams expect. So more invitations to bid haven't automatically necessarily meant or translated to more wins, less stress, or really honestly better outcomes in general. So Shawn, I want to start with you, and from a leadership perspective, and it's a two-part question, and I personally hate two-part questions, so we're just going to go with the first part first, and then we'll go with the second part after that. But when did bid volume increases? When bid volume increases, what do you expect to improve as a leader there at Infinity? You're on mute there too, Shawn, just as a heads up.
I didn't realize I hit it. Thank you, Shawn.
Mhm.
From a higher level, what you tend to believe is that the more bids, as you touched on, that you can get out, the more sales, more revenue that you're going to actually generate. But it's more complex than that. And so when you're actually analyzing that, yes, the additional bid invitations, bid opportunities, they do increase your chances of winning more work. But you also have to take a look at what your staff can handle, and then also you have to be able to keep an eye on the market and understand the fluctuations of where the profitability is on those projects and the production levels that your guys in the field can actually obtain to keep you in a market and be competitive.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Is there anything that, I guess, for lack of a better term, is there anything that surprised you about how it actually impacted the business, say, revenue, margins, or really decision making inside the business?
From a standpoint of, increase in bids is the more opportunities is about the biggest thing that we have seen. We have been able to succeed and increase our capture rate, but strictly the percentage, when you look at it from that standpoint, it stays about the same. And so then you have to start looking at the bigger dynamics associated with the bidding and the capture rate and what's allowing that. Is it customer based? Is it the type of project? And that really starts dialing it in. Is it the area of work that you're chasing? Um, so you really have to start looking at a lot of other metrics rather than just saying, hey, keep bidding more, keep bidding more.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a conversation 2 days ago with a customer here in California, and we were really talking about, bid volume and the strategy around, what to actually bid and what not to. And really it comes down to qualifying that bid. And I think it's important for, the attendees to know you can dump a lot in the top of the sales funnel, but you really need to analyze, to your point, Shawn, what's coming out the bottom. Are there any themes to the data in your capture rate or close percentage that you can lean into? Because as you increase your bid volume, right? Let's say we're at a standard 15% capture or close percentage. If you've got a large flow in that funnel, moving that percentage up a point or two, just a point or two, to 16 or 17%, can be real helpful and gain some traction for your team. So I think that's very helpful context for that, Shawn. Appreciate that thought there. Deron, I want to maybe bring you in from the operational side, on the ground. What changed first for your, teams and estimating teams and project management teams as volume increased, or as you saw volume increase?
I would say the number one thing that impacted us was just the pressure. With that increased number of bids invitation to bid, as they come in, they start to stack up because we're talking about we have not increased our estimators. So we're talking about the same staff, but you see an increase in the number of bids coming in. So what the pressure there is to get to as many as you can in basically the same amount of time. And so obviously some things end up falling by the wayside. Your your quality, and not that our guys aren't capturing it and aren't producing quality results, but that double check that you needed to do, that extra look that you needed to do, there's no time to do that anymore. And so what you find is that your quality might suffer. The other thing is that you've got so many coming across. It's also possible, depending on who's doing the checking, who's doing the gatekeeping at the front, that you might miss ones that at a slower rate coming in were, almost automatic for your team that you would definitely bid on. And now you may take a cursory glance because you've got that inbox that's just filling at a rate that you'll fall behind, and you'll never be able to catch up if you get too far behind.
Yeah, I think that's really good insight there. And it feels like almost feels like it's a dance, right? Between timelines and keeping your quality up and keeping your
Yes.
people, maybe dare I say, keeping your people sane,
Yes.
in the long
Well,
run.
because then they can also burn out as they start to see more, and then you're increasing that volume, but you're not increasing the number of hours that they have available in that day. And then so other things, other aspects of their job and other items start to suffer as they try and just handle the increased volume that has come in.
Yeah, yeah, very solid point. So, what we're hearing is that more bids, didn't fail because teams weren't working hard or dare I say enough, right? They failed more because really, I'd say maybe twofold capacity, but what that system can hold from a capacity standpoint didn't scale really at the same
Mm-hmm.
pace as demand. I see a lot of conversations that, teams get really excited about demand and really get excited about growth. But when you kind of get to the edge of that scale and that capacity, things can start to break down. And really what you want to stay away from are really the things that you highlighted, right? Making sure you hit timelines and deadlines and really making sure the quality of your bids going out don't falter because a small mistake can be pretty costly in that bid process essentially.
Absolutely.
Awesome. That's great. That's great, Deron. Jennifer, from an IT and systems perspective, I know this is your specialty. What tends to break first when volume increases, but workflows don't necessarily change with it?
So I would say the first thing that breaks is visibility. Leadership loses the visibility to uh, all of the real time view of what's in the funnel, who's owning what, what's on track, because it's just let's get through them quickly and we lose that visibility. Standardization comes in a close second. It's hard to follow those standardized processes when you don't have enough time. And then your systems are going to start to break down when the processes aren't being followed. Teams fall back into very reactive. This is how I always did it. I stored it here. I didn't move it to the server. I didn't run that process because I just didn't have time. Those are big points of failure for us from an IT perspective.
Yeah, I would say the visibility piece is super key. And Shawn, I might solicit some of your feedback. I think that's a great point here. With you leading the business, what how do that age old adage of like you need to work on the business, not in the business, right? I've heard that pretty much my entire career. Do you have any nuggets of wisdom on how you try to maintain, that visibility of your business so you're not sucked into the day to day, so to speak there?
Yeah, and it's a fine line and a balance, especially as a growing and as you go through growth pains. I think the biggest thing is you have to trust the people that you're putting in leadership, and allow them to follow those metrics and make sure that they're clear on what those metrics are, so then they can report that stuff back upstream. Because if I can't trust my team down below me, and I'm having to get down the ground level and basically find all the stuff that I'm asking them to do, then number one is that I ask myself, is it a process problem or a people problem? And I can tell you, I don't have a people problem. So a lot of times it goes back to the processes. And then are we clear on the processes? Do we have them documented? And that's what keeps you out of the weeds.
Yeah, I think that's great wisdom there. It's almost like as you lead larger and larger teams, your day is impacted more by your do not do list than your actual to-do list. I think that's wise wisdom for all of our attendees. If you're in a leadership role, being able to stay above to gain some of that visibility that Jennifer was talking about into your business. And then also you can start to troubleshoot where you're standardized, to her second point, and maybe where you're not standardized, and you can help the business move closer to those two goals. I think that's great feedback. Jennifer, appreciate you highlighting those 2 points. I'm taking a few notes here and I wrote those 2 words down. So I think that's very important. All right, let's move to our first poll. We'll go ahead and pop up our poll here real quick. Make sure I've got my visibility here to this poll. So I'll read through it. Would love for you to join us in interacting with this poll. So what happens when bid volume increases at your specific firm? And would certainly appreciate your interaction here. This helps inform future topics of the BuildUp series as well. So I've got a few choices here. Estimators work nights and weekends. We rush takeoffs and scope reviews. We submit bids just to stay visible. Heard that actually 2 days ago as well. We feel like we're constantly reacting, and then all of the above. It's interesting. Probably the past 60 days, I've talked to 2 or 3 different estimator groups and teams that mentioned, they've got 12 to 14 hours per day, at least 4 days a week. Fridays is a little lighter. But it's a common theme in the industry where we're seeing lots of people work over extended hours, nights and weekends to get stuff done. So feel free to make your selection, and in just a few seconds, we'll go ahead and wrap this poll and take a look at the results, which I think we can go ahead and move forward on. Okay, pretty even spread here. We submit bids to stay visible, 0%, but what won out was we feel like we're constantly reacting, and then we've got an all of the above, and then really 20% split with estimators work nights and weekends, and we rush takeoffs and scope reviews. So I think main point here, right, is kind of what we talked about before in regards to making sure we have timelines met, quality met, and ensuring that we're staying true to what we're telling our customers we're actually going to do. So appreciate that interaction. Thank you so much. All right, let's go on to our second topic to talk through, what estimators really should stop doing. So one theme that comes up again and again is burnout, and we've already alluded to it here today already, and it's often blamed on workload, but in estimating, burnout usually comes from how work is distributed, essentially. So Deron, would love to come to you. When teams mature and scale successfully, right? So they just do a lot of the stuff that we just talked about. Well, what work do you see estimators stop doing, and what do they start spending more time on instead? And that second part of the question, probably the most important part.
Yeah, so once they can actually get either on par or slightly ahead as the intake is coming in, they can actually make better decisions on what are jobs that are consistent with ones that we've been successful with in the past. They can make faster decisions on, okay, I don't need to spend as much time on this type of job because it's not in our wheelhouse. It's not something that we're necessarily interested in. And then the other point I would make is that in the takeoff process or in the getting that bid together, they can actually spend more time making a quality bid, ensuring that we have the best possible opportunity to win that bid and to negotiate with the general contractor or the owner, whoever has requested the bid.
Yeah, so I'm hearing so you can almost get more highly selective on your selection criteria for what you go after. And I'd love to get maybe your more in-depth take here, Deron. I've always envisioned, right, as we bring in more and more technology into the industry, and certainly the construction industry is on its way to a paradigm shift on the technology front. I'm almost seeing a shift with the estimator's role where they almost become closer to the customer, so to speak, instead of being far away, whether that's takeoff, quantity survey, building an estimate from the bottom up. But I also see them, as some of those tasks get automated, I almost see them moving closer to maybe a project manager role, or even just closer, spending more time with customers. Have you seen that in your tenure in the industry?
So far, yes, absolutely. In fact, within our department, our estimators actually dual role. They also do project management as well. And so what the if they can spend if they can be more focused on their bids, if they can spend less time chasing and just trying to keep from drowning in the bids as they come in, then that allows them actually that time to quality analyze the bids that we've been successful on, and then also help with the project management side of those conquered bids as well.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of those. It's interesting. Those dual roles of estimator and project manager are pretty common in the industry.
Mhm.
And a lot of times when the bid volume goes up, like we're talking about today, they're usually the first pinch point that I see, right? Because it's hard to do hybrid positions no matter what they are, but especially in that role, because you have got a lot of admin and focused office work, but then you're also out managing teams and subcontractors as well in the field. So um, it's interesting to kind of understand where technology is taking us on where they place their time, if something can be automated. So I think that's a real good point. And I think what you said too, Deron, goes a little bit back to what Shawn had mentioned with capture rate and close percentage, right? If your project managers that are really tight and close to the incoming bids are being able to really focus in on selection criteria, maybe that 15% doesn't necessarily go up to 16 or 17. Maybe you can get that up 18, 19, even 20% capture rate,
Mhm.
which obviously helps your value of your time, so to speak.
Definitely.
Awesome.
And then also, if they have the time that they can better understand the project, then there's also opportunities for optimizing the crews that are actually out there doing the work and helping to make sure that you have minimal mistakes, you have better timing as you move through the different stages of the construction process. And overall, it allows them to be more successful in their dual role.
Yeah, that's a solid point. Like more focus on the project management side of it can lead to a much more efficient job for not only your team but your subcontractor partners as well. But yeah, that's a very
Mhm.
valuable point. Jennifer, from your side, how important is it to protect the estimators, focus on those high value tasks as volume grow, given your perspective on that?
So ultimately, I keep my perspective on if my estimators are doing admin or clerical work, we're paying premium dollars for low value tasks. I want to find automating and process for them that allows them to focus on risk detection, scope validation, strategy, things that they are really skilled at, rather than all of their time on admin tasks that we could find other ways to do. I think that also goes to their morale because those guys are lit up by the more strategic thinking and the important decisions that we need them to make based on their skills. So if they are day in and day out doing drudge work of admin tasks, that's just going to burn them out and have their morale suffer, and we aren't going to get from them what we want also.
Yeah, there's two benefits I hear you kind of talking through, right? Obviously, you're moving from lower value to higher value and higher leverage tasks. But that's one thing I actually haven't even thought about too, right? Obviously, that's a business outcome, but you almost get a personal outcome from your team as well, like with happiness in their role and being able to maybe focus on more fulfilling work.
Yeah, more stimulating work for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make me want to quit, put me in front of a 900 line spreadsheet and ask me to do some data analysis there, that's pretty tough for me sometimes. So I think that's
Yeah.
a very valid point. Just fulfillment in the role, technology can certainly help that as well. Fantastic. Um, Arnav, would love to maybe come next to you, sir. What do you reckon is changing in the larger estimation, pre-con space in terms of tackling bid volumes? You're with our customers, sometimes daily in your role, trying to understand how our customers are using our products and how they're what they're asking for on our roadmap. So I would love to just get your feel here on what what that change is in the larger estimating pre-con space in terms of like the bid volumes.
Sure, Sean. So, Sean, a few years ago, or like a decade ago, the bottleneck was digitizing the takeoff. Now, most teams do have some tool for that. And now the new bottleneck is what happens around the tool. So, how you intake jobs, how you prioritize them, what is the visibility you have on them, and how much rework you have to do. So, people lose time chasing plan notes, digging through PDFs. They redo work because some assumptions are not aligned properly. So, I think the opportunity going forward is building workflows that reduce the number of touches per bid and help reduce the amount of rework you have to do. And it's not just speeding up measuring.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's well said, Arnav. It's interesting because you always think you're on the cusp of a paradigm shift, right, with new technology. But if you look back, we've kind of already walked through this, right? In different areas where you had a blueprint and then you had the little pen and the wheel and right, and you did this all manually, and then obviously it's been digitized, and now that whole process is being automated. It's interesting to see how the paradigm shifts continue. So I think, overall, right, the takeaway here is that scaling isn't about asking estimators to necessarily work faster. It's really about how you can redesign, or I like the term architect, the role so their time is spent where it actually creates value, to Jennifer's point, right? How are you really focusing those specific roles in your construction company to extract the most value? And obviously the good thing is that's typically what your team members want as well, and they'll find those roles more fulfilling as well. All right, let's go to our poll number 2. So let's go ahead and pull that up, and I'll walk you through this as we go through it. So where do estimators at your firm spend most of their time today? So we've got a few options here: manual takeoffs, reviewing scope and risk, pricing strategies, rework and clarifications, or firefighting deadlines. I'm sure there's probably could put a number 6 in there of all of the above. I hear these quite often, but it would be good to just kind of get an idea of where our audience is in regards to, where your estimators at your firm spend the most of your time. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the responses we got and how it broke out for us. Okay, interesting. Definitely manual takeoffs is about 70%. And then, pretty even spread over reviewing scope and risk, pricing strategies, and rework and clarification. So I think it's great feedback. There's a lot of room for opportunity to maybe repurpose some of that time to strategy or reviewing scope and risk as we go. So I appreciate everybody participating there in regards to that poll. All right, let's continue on. We've got quite a bit to cover here, and we're about at the halfway mark. And we want to make sure we leave some time for some questions. So maybe our third topic, and Shawn, would love to maybe come to you regarding, what scalable teams do differently. So, in regards to peak bid periods, are where systems either, hold or crack. So Shawn, during high volume weeks or maybe even months, right? What separates teams that absorb the pressure from teams that you've seen burn out in your history?
What I've seen is that the more sugar you provide, the better off you are. Meaning cookies, cupcakes, things like that. But
I was
on a
wondering if you
serious
said
note,
sugar or structure. I was hoping for a loop there.
Everybody likes sugar, so, but
Amen.
on a serious note, I mean, the standardization, you have to really look at where the labor hours are being spent. And is that valuable? If it's not valuable, then how do you standardize it? How do you automate it? And how do you make sure that the same process is being done consistently the same way by everybody on the team? Because if you can standardize that, as humans, we like, even though we all fight it, we actually like standardization. We all strive in that. We're creatures of habit. So the more you can standardize, the better off you are. And then if you're kind of looking at that, then you can basically that creates the visibility that you need in order to look at that standardization and the process and of the team and verify, that they are getting the production that you need them to, along with the personal, you know, um, value of their job that they're doing. If they're sitting there beating their head against the wall because they're not winning bids, that's demoralizing. So you have to basically start removing those failure points in order to basically, you know, make the standardization model even better and make the team more efficient and better at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I heard standardization first, so then you can access the visibility. I'm curious, Shawn, and Deron, I'd love to come to you on this as well once we get through with Shawn. But what tends to break first in your experience when maybe those systems of standardization and visibility aren't necessarily in place, or maybe in place like they should be based on the volume? Maybe to you, Shawn, on that question there. Is there a specific area you see tension or strain start to break if those systems aren't in place?
Yeah, so the entire team starts getting frazzled. They start losing the direction that they're going. They start being behind all the tasks and everything. And so now everybody's playing catch up. They're trying to figure out which fire to put out first. And then that turns into, well, I didn't have enough time to look at the ITBs or the bid invitations. Now they're rushing through a bid just to meet a deadline. And so now they're just plugging numbers and they're not looking at what we truly can go and do the work for, looking at what the production rates are, how competitive the market is currently. So you run into a problem of, the quality risk of the takeoff and just, falling into the trap. Well, we made the bid date, so congratulations, but you weren't competitive. So that's where the breakdowns start to really happen. And then, that starts putting doubt in your people on their job performance and everything else. And so you have to be really specific and watch that in your team to make sure that they're not getting that direction and they're not getting deflated because of those things.
Yeah, you used a good word there, demoralizing, man. To be reactionary on a bid, you sometimes work late nights to get it out, and then you submit and find out same day you weren't you didn't win it. I mean, that can be really tough for sure. I think that's a great point. Deron, any additional thoughts there outside of just the reactionary piece? Anything you might add to that?
Yeah, so to echo what Shawn was saying, is that when you get in that reactionary mode, then you are just trying to fill numbers. Oh, yeah, well, you celebrate that we did get the bid in time, but did we miss something? Um, did we do it as well as we could have had we been more on top of it, in front of it, per se? And so then you're left with doubt. So then you start doubting yourself, and your confidence level starts to decrease, especially if you not only time this with some not well thought out bids, but also with some losses. And then the combination of that is absolutely, you know, incredibly hard for the team to take, because you're not spending any less time on this. Okay. But your efforts are not being rewarded, and you're not able to give it the attention to detail that you really want, because you'll look at it and you'll say, man, we should have done better on that particular number. Or, oh, wow, this is, more complex than what we first thought. It's no wonder, we didn't really understand, or weren't given the time to truly understand what the bid really was and the scope and such.
Yeah, that's great feedback there, Deron. I usually tie like So if you're reactionary, you tend to lean more tactical, right? On
Hmm.
things. Hey, we've got a bid form that needs to be filled out. We've got to respond, tactical response. If you're less reactionary and more proactive on things, usually you lean a little bit more strategic, like, yes, we have to get this bid form filled out, but how do we implement a strategy, or is there something that could be value engineered here that might put us up and over maybe some other contractors that are going in to the same job? So I think this is a very pertinent conversation. So I think it's more when we talk about it in the vein of technology, I think it becomes more or less about speed, but more about resilience. Essentially, I think that might be a good way to kind of cap that third point there of conversation. So appreciate that feedback. Moving over to maybe our fourth and second to last point here, maybe technology as a resilience engine. AI workflows is the foundation of scale. Arnav, I want to bring you in here specifically because this is your day to day. So when Beam AI customers specifically really start scaling bid volume, would love to get your perspective. How are they actually using automation and visibility tools to protect that estimator focus beyond just really just speeding up the takeoff process?
Sure, Sean. So I think the way that teams can scale is end to end. So step one is intake and prioritization. So we have a tool called Bid Sniper. It helps bring ITBs into one place so that your team is not living in emails and portals. And so the team can decide exactly what's worth pursuing. A tool called Beam GPT, which can be used to answer specific questions inside the plan set fast. So where is this called out? What does that note say? And what's in the schedule? So it's not magic, but it's a way to cut down the time spent hunting. And step three is execution with consistency. So we do the takeoff against agreed scope and templates, and you get an interactive view of the takeoff plus the Excel breakdown so that estimators can price with confidence. And we are even developing custom estimate form proposal templates essentially so that you get your proposal form filled out for you. And if you need to adjust the takeoff, the teams can edit it directly in the same workspace rather than starting over. Step four is visibility. So Bid Dashboard helps you track the status so that the team can see what's in flight, what's at risk, and where they need to intervene. So I guess the all in all of it is that we don't need to bid everything. It's we can handle more bids with the same capacity by reducing repetitive work.
Yeah, I think that's greatly said, Arnav. It's like it's more about you, back to Jennifer's point of, high leverage, high value task, where that focus is. And I think, if you're a leader listening to this, helping your team understand where those high leverage and high value tasks are and where those focuses should be, whether you're an estimator, a project manager, or maybe you're doing a hybrid role, right? Being able to identify where those focal points should be, I think, is critical. And that's what's important for teams to understand, is that it isn't about really bidding everything that you can. It's about creating maybe something more along the lines of capacity aware bidding, right? So you're being very effective with your time as you go forward. All right. On maybe our last and final point, to have a few other items we want to make sure to take care of in our time together today, but just want to really go through some final recommendations from the group, actionable advice, to wrap things up. So maybe Shawn, we'll start with you specifically. If you were designing your estimating operation today to handle, really, let's just say 4 or 5 times the bid volume with the same team, maybe walk me through what you might change first, and really what you would never go back to. Essentially, is there some specific points that maybe Infinity has moved away from, or are planning to move away from? Would I think that definitely help our audience?
The biggest thing that we have moved away from and we analyze pretty regularly is where is the biggest waste of man hours? based off of that cost per man hour. That's the biggest thing you have to look at. So I don't ever look at anything that I want to reduce and not have the number of people that work for us. I want to be able to go do work more efficient to where we can actually go do more work. So if we can look at more efficient, better ways to do it, that's the biggest thing from an estimating standpoint. Man, it has been a bottleneck in this industry since the beginning. Whether or not you mentioned, the roller days, the initial hardboard digitizer, the first on-screen digitizers to where now, it's being done by a program. So that I wouldn't go back from. I remember the days of just click, click, and beep, beep, and I can't ever imagine going back to that way or just reusing the roller wheel. So you talk about man hours saved and production man hours from a price perspective, we have surpassed anything from days before. So that's, and to change anything moving forward, there are a lot of things that are still the next bottleneck. And I think that's what you always have to do is you have to look at what the next bottleneck is. And so it's getting the quantities, it's plugging it in your pricing sheet. Just like Arnav was saying, it's generating a proposal, more automation, to where you're not spending those estimators and project managers' time having to do all that stuff because it's more admin type application and not to, make sure that the admin staff that you have doesn't or understands that they're important too. But I've got a lot of other things that they could be concentrating on rather than typing a proposal up.
Yeah, I think there's always work to do. It's just what work we really focus on. And I think the other thing is what you just mentioned, Shawn, is like there's always a bottleneck to fix. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't really have jobs, right? So once we get
Right.
one thing fixed, let's find the other one and let's see if there's a piece of technology out there, maybe a process or a system change, that we could go after to maybe unlock more efficiency. I think that's great. Deron, would love to, as we continue our round robin here, would love to maybe get your feedback. If you were designing your estimating operation today, to handle 4 or 5x more bid volume, what would you change first? And is there anything you wouldn't go back to? And maybe we just build on what Shawn said as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is always looking for what pieces can we automate that we're doing manually today that don't make sense for handling an increased volume or an increased attention, and trying to eliminate those as our first steps of freeing up more time to do the important activities, making sure that when we're submitting those bids that they're quality, that they are well within our capabilities of being able, to fulfill the bids. And when you can do that, then it makes everything move faster. You also, like we discussed earlier with the dual role, now also those guys are not just behaving as paper pushers and spreadsheet fillers. They're now also heavily involved in the job because all of a sudden you've freed up with your structure behind your bids. You've freed up that time that they were spending doing the manual processes and doing the mundane tasks that are necessary. And now they can do other things. They can also explore taking on more responsibility within that as well.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Darren. It's interesting because a lot of our customer base here at BMAI is they are estimators, right? Or they're that project manager estimator, and those are the end user of our products. So I typically end up talking to a lot of them and know a lot of them personally just from my time in the industry. And I've seen, to your point, the focus on automation can be a needle mover in someone's career as well. Because I've seen a lot of individuals that have, adopted or, approached it from a growth mindset on getting AI involved or some piece of technology involved. I've seen those individuals that I know personally increase their ceiling on their career and be promoted quicker. And I've also seen some really smart minds that just don't have that thought process of adopting technology and feeling like it's how we're doing it is okay today and not addressing the bottlenecks. They certainly have the ability to level up, but they're not leveling up as quickly in some of the instances I've seen outside the industry. So I think that automation piece is super timely for sure. Jennifer, is there anything that you might add to, to what Shawn and Deron had mentioned already in regards to, the bid process and the bid volume increasing?
I think I'd be looking for a bid intake triage system, something that gives us either automated or based on a set of parameters, a way to triage every one of those bids more quickly and more consistently, and cutting down on some of those initial steps that take our estimators so long just to get started on a bid and make that initial decision, but ultimately leading to some analytics that might help us make those decisions differently and see which ones are actually promoting our business versus the ones that we consistently estimate and never win. How to better look at those analytics. And for what I'd never go back to is that tribal knowledge of, well, that's the way we've always done it. We always bid those. We never bid those. Let's use a data-driven approach to make better decisions.
Yeah, that never happens, right? The tribal knowledge
Right.
piece. I think that might be the biggest, or maybe I should reframe that. The hardest thing to whittle out of an organization is the tribal knowledge. You love and need those people that have it, but
Absolutely.
how do we get it in a structured format is for sure. And I think you said something really valuable, like, it's almost like a process. How do you get to go or no go on a bid? Are we going to qualify this in, or are we going to qualify it out quickly? And so you collapse that time in the actual bid process. But the next step is, where do we, once we qualify in, qualify out, how do we spend our time on those bids that have proven from data that we can win at a higher capture rate? I think that's beautifully said. All right, Arnav, let's take us home. Any final takes on this topic specifically you would offer from your perspective?
Shawn, I think Jennifer really hit the nail on the head there. So she was right, spot on by triaging the bids more effectively. But if I had to add another perspective, it would be maybe how the standard scope, a standard SOP for performing the takeoff, and every way that are the same regard like bespoke takeoffs and one-off spreadsheets where everyone has different assumptions, different formats, and because that's one of the major sources of rework, missed scopes, and burnout. So the goal is simple: to make production predictable.
Yeah, I think that hits the nail on the head there, Arnav. And I know your connection was a little spotty for us, but I think, from the first point on the SOP side, right? Like, how do you get a standard operating procedure in your business on how you qualify a bid? I mean, that's really the entry point of a bid coming into a business. Is it qualified in or qualified out, to Jennifer's point of a go or no go? So I think that, that would be a really smart place to start if you're, if you have a wide open bidding process today that says, hey, you send it to us, we're going to bid it. How do you begin to be a little bit more, I like the word prescriptive with it, right? How can you become more prescriptive with your bidding process, and starting on the criteria that you qualify a bid in or out, or knowing your ICP, your ideal customer profile, is a pretty solid place to start in making that bid process more efficient. So not only can your team be more effective, but they're just focusing on winning more as a team as well. So I think the big takeaway, today out of this is really growth and team sustainability. They don't really necessarily have to be trade-offs. You can have both. If bid volume is treated as a capacity problem, not necessarily quote unquote a hustle problem. And many times it is. So I think with that, that begins to wrap up our conversation. We have a few minutes left here. Before we move into some Q&A, which I think we have a few questions in the inbox here. But I think what we'll do is actually maybe we'll hold up on on the demo. We were going to have Arnav provide a demo, but he's going to work on his connection a little bit. I'd love to maybe just go over to some Q&A, and we'll pull up a few of these questions. And then, Shawn, Deron, Jennifer, would love to get your perspective on a few of these questions. So, Shawn, maybe come to you first on this first question. If you were presenting a business case to ownership, what would a strong, one-page summary include in regards to you? I think this is a good maybe a good question for you, just because you are, the owner at Infinity and you have a unique view on this.
So I think the easiest one pager was, where are your man hours spent and what is the cost per man hour that you're looking at trying to replace? If you can start analyzing that and answering that, any presentation on whether or not you're talking about automating, takeoffs, changing processes, changing procedures, looking at production rates, any of that stuff. If you start analyzing it from a production standpoint and a man hour per cost ratio, it's the easiest one-page explanation to go to an owner. Because if they're really worried about making budget or making profit, then they're concerned about how much money they're spending. So that's the easiest answer on that whole deal.
Yeah, I think that's like true first principles thinking, is like you're starting at the base case, right? Is that kind of your thinking, Shawn, there? You're starting at like, how do we build this from the ground up?
Oh yeah. I mean, and if you're specifically talking from an estimating standpoint, you really have to analyze, where are your man hours being spent, and then start dwindling that down for the time wasted and the cheaper rates that should be applied to that versus what you're paying those estimators to basically do per hour. When you start looking at it from a function like that, it's you can't argue it from an owner standpoint. If somebody does argue it, they've just got their head in the sand.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's well said. It's always good to approach it from first principles. Deron, I'd love to get your perspective on this particular question from the operations, point of view. What are some early warning signs, that bid volume is starting to hurt quality? Obviously, you're working with the estimators and the project managers, day in, day out. Are there any, warning signs that maybe you can share with the greater industry here on what should they be looking for to make sure they're kind of ahead of that wave instead of behind it?
Well, I think one thing that you want to try and do is make sure that you don't have just one member of your team making all the decisions as far as what you're looking at from an invitation to bid. You want to make sure, because what you'll end up finding is that people will have certain tendencies to go after things that either they're comfortable with or have been successful with in the past. So you don't want to get locked into that just one person looking. But if you're constantly fighting, trying to get ahead of the curve of the bids coming in, you'll end up with that. People will revert back to the things that they're comfortable with, and those things may or may not be compatible with what gets your company the best opportunities to both win the bids and also to be successful with the winning bids and continue to grow as a company.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Deron. You almost have to like triage your team, right? Like, if you've got
Mhm.
only one point of view or POV letting bids into the company, you need to assess that, see if there's any blind spots maybe there. Makes a lot of sense. One more question I think we'll take here, and Jennifer, would love to get your perspective on this, given your background. And I'd say it's a fairly large question, and there probably we could take this a few different ways. So feel free to answer, based on your experience. But, what's a realistic 90-day goal for measuring impact after adopting AI? And maybe we can even say technology in general. We see so much new technology coming up. We see people buy software, it sits on the shelf, it's not adopted, it's not used. Would love to, especially with your experience, just get your perspective on, are there any guiding principles on what a realistic 90-day goal would be for actually measuring the impact of technology in a company?
Sure. I think as I was taking on that new application, I would look at what my admin tasks were, what kind of time that was taking, get a starting number so that I know what I'm looking for to decide if this is actually reducing our admin tasks. I'd certainly look at the process before you bring that application on. What is our process? Do we have it standardized so that when we add automation to it, we can measure whether we're faster or right back where we started and the software really isn't helping us? I think some KPIs and some dashboards to measure those things so that you look back at 60 days and say, we were here when we started. What's the percentage of increase we've got now?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Where's your set point where you started, and what's that gap, and what have you achieved there? I think that's a great point. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate that feedback and that we were able to take some questions. Arnav, maybe if you could, help close this out, would be great if maybe you could kind of walk us through how teams actually use Beam AI day to day to really absorb more bid volume without burning out, their estimators and teams in general. So I'll hand it over to you for a short walkthrough.
For sure, Shawn. Uh, is my screen visible?
It is.
So yes, so this is the first screen that you see when you log into Beam AI, and you can get started right by submitting a takeoff here. So for example, you just start by entering the name of your latest project, and what you have to do here is just add the PDF files that you have received for the construction plans, and you select the scope for your trade, and all of these trade items are already pre-configured as per your preferences, and you can add any uh, assumptions or process project specific instructions, just like you would with a chat GPT prompt. It's that easy. So for example, assume all rebar is grade 60 unless noted otherwise. And this is not mandatory. Like the plans and the pre-agreed on the pre-filled scope is enough. And what's next is just choosing the latest required by date. That's the latest date by which you need the takeoff back by, and you just hit submit. So a couple of minutes of uploading the plan, selecting the scope, and that's it. And you get the takeoff back a couple of days later, depending on the size of the plan, and that this is what a complete takeoff looks like essentially. So all of the plans in the PDF are on the right, and all of the sheets are annotated here. And you can go ahead and export this output as an Excel file or a PDF file. You can even make minor edits right here using the integrated toolbar to get the updated quantities. So this is what an exam, I'll just pull up an example export. Just give me a minute. So this is what an example export looks like. So this is something that you're already used to looking at. This is the AI's output is not useful unless it looks like that is human readable essentially. So all of the features, their details, all of the rebar tonnages are captured right here in this report. And this information is even present right here on the platform, all of the concrete volumes and the rebar tonnages. And we are working on building out the estimation capability. This is what an pre-failed estimate template looks like, essentially. So it's just the takeoff quantities with all of the added pricing logic and the labor factors and the material factors on top of it. So that is about the end-to-end offering when you start a takeoff, and you get the complete output that is ready to bid. Parallelly, how Beam AI helps you to essentially bid more, and what Jennifer touched on is triage the incoming invitation to bids more efficiently, is we have a tool called Bid Sniper. So Bid Sniper essentially pulls out all of those ITBs from your inbox and collates all of them into one place. This is filterable by trade, by location, and by due dates. And you can view an ITB exactly like you would in your inbox, essentially. And you can even open the bid from right here. Once you think that this is worth bidding on, so you can select the bids that you're interested in and add them to your bid board. So this bid board allows you to track and prioritize all of the projects that you're bidding on. You can assign it to your team members. They get notified that they are responsible for it. You get automated reminders for the bid due date so that you are on top of the curve always. And of course, this bid board is linked to your takeoff, so you can access all of this information right in one place. So this serves as a source of truth for your team, creating more visibility. And going back to the takeoff, onto the takeoff screen essentially. So Uh, this tool, Beam GPT, helps you find that pesky detail without looking through all of the PDF pages, without having to hit Control F and hit specific keywords. For example, you can just ask it about questions like if there are any specific bidding purposes, assumptions I should use for the pier length. And yes, it's mentioned somewhere on the plan itself that the average pier length is 23 feet. So there you have it. You don't have to read through 10 dense construction plans to find that detail.
Fantastic. Thank you, Arnav. Really appreciate you walking us through that and a few different ways people could approach Beam AI and automating some of their workflows in the pre-con process. Before we go, would love to maybe just pull up our forecast slide as well. This is an effort of love from Shawn and his team as well. Shawn, maybe I'll just turn it over to you for 20 or 30 seconds if you could kind of let the audience know about Forecast and how they can get in touch with you.
You bet. So Forecast is a single dashboard for tracking all the pours, and whether or not you're a concrete subcontractor, a general contractor, pump company, testing lab, it basically consolidates everything you're trying to track associated with that pour. Time, mixed design, slump, and you can actually send out email notifications currently to anybody associated or assigned to that pour. And here in the first quarter, we'll have text notifications coming out for that. What we've seen just using it, rolling it out, our dispatch is saving roughly about 15 hours of time per week. And it is cutting down on so many mistakes of wrong mixes being ordered, wrong mix designs being sent to the job site, people not showing up because they didn't know what time the last change was. So it's just a lot of notification system, a lot of tracking system. They obviously with the QR code presently, they can hit that and it'll take them to our website. And we have a contact us on that, and we can definitely give them more information and walk them through a live demo and show them what it's all about.
Awesome. Thanks, Shawn. I encourage anybody who has a need to potentially look into Forecast. Shawn and team are living it day to day and seeing true ROI out of it, and just came off of debuting it at the World of Concrete show last week as well. So kudos to Shawn, you and your team for building what you have. I know it's going to impact the industry in a large way. So really appreciate that. And so with that, I know we've gone a touch over today, but that brings us to the end of today's session. A huge thank you to the team from Infinity Concrete and to Arnav for sharing such practical, real world insight and really pouring back into the industry as thought leaders today. And so thank you to everyone who joined us live as well. And we'll be sending out the recording at some point next week. And if you'd like to learn more about Beam AI, you'll see a link on the screen here as well that you can approach us. So thanks again for being part of the Build Up community, and we'll see you at the next session next month. I hope everybody has a great day. Thanks and take care.